GTA 4 might be the most unique GTA game. It just feels so different. Why is that? Let's talk. Let's start with Niko himself. He's a Serbian immigrant, fresh off the boat in Liberty City. From the moment he steps foot in America, we see the country through his eyes. And it's not all stars and stripes. Niko's background as an Eastern European war veteran gives him a unique perspective. He's seen some dark stuff, and he's not easily impressed by the glitz and glamour of Liberty City. This sets the tone for the entire game. It's grittier, more grounded, and at times, pretty bleak. Now let's talk about the American dream. In previous GTA games, we've seen characters climb the criminal ladder, amassing wealth and power. But Niko? He's just trying to survive and maybe find a little peace. His pursuit of the American dream is more about escaping his past than achieving riches. This perspective influences everything in the game. The missions feel less about building an empire and more about staying afloat in a foreign land. The humor is darker, often poking fun at American culture in ways that only an outsider could. Even Liberty City itself feels different through Niko's eyes. It's not the playground of excess we've seen in other GTA games. Instead, it's a complex, often hostile environment that Niko has to navigate carefully. The supporting characters also reflect this outsider's view. Roman, Niko's cousin, represents the immigrant who's bought into the American dream, always chasing the next big score. Then there's characters like Little Jacob, another immigrant trying to make it in Liberty City. All of this adds up to a GTA game that feels more like a critique of the American dream than a celebration of it. It's not about rising to the top of the criminal world. It's about surviving in a system that often feels rigged against you. I've always felt that Niko is one of the most complex protagonists we've seen in a GTA game. He's not just a blank slate for the player to project onto. Niko comes with his own backstory, his own motivations, and most importantly, his own moral compass, even if it's a bit skewed. I remember playing through the game and feeling genuinely conflicted about some of the choices Niko had to make. Should he pursue revenge, or try to let go of the past? Should he trust his cousin Roman, or listen to his own instincts? These aren't just arbitrary game choices. They're deeply rooted in who Niko is as a character. But it's not just Niko who drives the narrative. The supporting cast in GTA 4 is incredibly rich and varied. Take Roman, for example. At first I thought he was just comic relief, this goofy cousin always getting into trouble. But as the game progressed, I started to see him as a representation of the American dream. Always chasing the next big score, always believing that success is just around the corner. Then there's characters like Little Jacob, Brucey, and Packy McCreary. Each of these characters feels like they could be the protagonist of their own game. They're not just there to give Niko missions, they each have their own arc, their own struggles, and their own impact on the overall story. I think what really sets GTA 4 apart is how these characters interact with each other. The relationships feel genuine and evolve over time. I remember feeling a real sense of camaraderie as I hung out with these characters, learning more about their lives and backstories. Even the antagonists in GTA 4 are more than just obstacles for Niko to overcome. Characters like Dmitry Raskolov and Jimmy Pegorino have their own motivations and backstories that make them feel like real people rather than just video game bosses. The character-driven narrative also influences the structure of the game. Unlike other GTAs where you're mostly working towards building a criminal empire, in GTA 4, I felt like I was navigating a complex web of relationships and loyalties. The missions didn't just feel like arbitrary tasks, they felt like natural extensions of the characters' stories. I think this approach reaches its peak in the game's endings. Without spoiling anything, the choices you make throughout the game, and especially at the end, have real consequences. And these consequences hit hard, because they're not just about winning or losing. They're about the fates of characters we've grown to care about. This character-focused approach even extends to the city itself. Liberty City feels alive in a way that previous GTA settings didn't, at least to me. The streets are filled with characters going about their lives, each with their own stories. It makes the world feel more lived in and real. Now, I'm not saying this approach is perfect. Sometimes the character development can slow down the pace of the game, and if you're not invested in these characters, some of the more dialogue-heavy sections might drag. But for me, this is what makes GTA 4 special. Now, let's talk about the visual tone. When I first booted up GTA 4, I remember being struck by how different it looked from San Andreas. Gone were the vibrant, saturated colors. Instead, I was greeted with a muted, almost washed-out palette. The skies often seem overcast, the streets are grimy, and even the sunny days have this kind of harsh, unforgiving light to them. I think this visual style does a lot to set the mood. It's like the whole city is wearing this patina of decay and disillusionment. When I'm driving through Broker or Bohan, I really feel like I'm in a lived-in, weathered city, not a playground built for my entertainment. The weather system in GTA 4 also adds to this gritty realism. I love how the rain looks in this game. It's not just a visual effect, it changes how the city feels. The roads get slick, visibility drops, and the whole mood of Liberty City shifts. I remember times when I'd just park Niko somewhere high up during a thunderstorm and watch the city below. It's oddly beautiful in its bleakness, but it's not just about how the city looks, it's about how it feels to navigate. The driving in GTA 4 is a lot more weighty and realistic than in other GTA games. I know some people weren't fans, but I loved how cars felt like they had real mass and momentum. Speeding through traffic actually felt dangerous, which added to the overall sense of a more grounded, realistic world. The pedestrians and NPCs contribute a lot to the atmosphere too. In previous GTA games, I always felt like the citizens were mainly there as props or comedic relief. But in GTA 4, the NPCs feel more like real people going about their lives. They react more realistically to what's happening around them. If I cause a ruckus, I can see genuine panic. If I'm just walking down the street, I might overhear snippets of conversation that feel authentic to the city. I also want to talk about the radio stations and media in GTA 4. While there's still plenty of satire and humor, it feels more biting and cynical than in other GTA games. The talk radio shows, the TV programs, the in-game internet, they all paint a picture of a city, and by extension, a country, that's struggling with issues of corruption, consumerism, and cultural decay. It's funny, sure, but there's an underlying darkness to it that I find really compelling. The missions and activities in the game also contribute to this more serious tone. Sure, there are still crazy, over-the-top moments, but a lot of the missions deal with pretty heavy themes. I remember feeling genuinely uncomfortable during some of the darker storylines. It's not always fun in the traditional sense, but it makes for a more engaging and thought-provoking experience. Even the side activities feel more grounded. Instead of over-the-top stunt jumps or wacky rampages, a lot of the side content in GTA 4 is more low-key. I actually enjoyed just calling up friends and going bowling, or to a comedy club. It made Liberty City feel more like a real place where people live, not just a backdrop for crazy action. The neighborhoods in GTA 4 also feel more distinct and realistic to me. Each area of the city has its own character, from the industrial decay of Actor to the towering skyscrapers of Algonquin. I love how the game uses these different areas to tell stories about class, immigration, and urban life. It's not just window dressing. The city itself is a character in the narrative. One thing that really stands out to me is how GTA 4 handles violence and consequences. Don't get me wrong, it's still a game where you can cause a lot of mayhem, but it feels weightier somehow. The combat is more brutal and less cartoonish. When I get into a fight or a shootout, it feels desperate and ugly, not stylized or glorified. All of these elements come together to create a world that feels more immersive and realistic than other GTA games. It's a city that doesn't really care about you, that exists independently of your actions. That can make it feel hostile at times, but also incredibly alive and authentic. Now, I know this darker, grittier approach isn't for everyone. Some players miss the more outlandish humor and over-the-top action of earlier GTA games, and that's fair. But for me, the more serious tone of GTA 4's world made for a more memorable and impactful experience. The main plot revolves around Niko's search for revenge, and man, it gets dark. As I played through the story, I felt the weight of Niko's past constantly bearing down on him. The war crimes he witnessed, the betrayals he experienced, all of this colors his interactions and decisions throughout the game. The game's humor, while definitely present, serves a different purpose than in other GTA titles. I noticed that the funny moments often have this underlying current of sadness or cynicism. Take Roman, for example. His optimism and jokes often feel like a thin veneer over a pretty depressing reality. It's funny, sure, but in a way that made me feel a bit uneasy. Throughout the game, I felt like the story was constantly subverting the idea of the American dream. Niko comes to Liberty City hoping for a better life, but what he finds is a city full of corruption, greed, and moral ambiguity. It's a pretty harsh critique of American society, and it doesn't pull any punches. The relationships in GTA 4 also contribute to this darker tone. Almost every character Niko interacts with is damaged in some way. From little Jacob's involvement in the drug trade to Packy's dysfunctional family, everyone seems to be struggling with their own demons. Even the romance options in the game aren't the lighthearted affairs you might expect. Niko's relationships with Michelle and Kate to be tinged with sadness and inevitability. It's like the game is saying, look, even love isn't an escape from the harshness of this world. The missions themselves often deal with heavy themes. Drug addiction, human trafficking, political corruption. These aren't just background elements. They're central to the story. What really drives home the dark tone for me are the game's endings. There's no truly happy ending for Niko. No matter what choices you make, there's always a price to be paid. It's a far cry from the top-of-the-world endings of some other GTA games. Now, I'm not saying GTA 4 is devoid of light moments. There are plenty of funny scenes, witty dialogues, and absurd situations. But I always felt like these moments of levity were there to provide brief respites from the overall darkness, not to define the tone of the game. In a way, I think this darker approach makes the story more impactful. By treating its themes and characters with seriousness, GTA 4 managed to tell a story that stuck with me long after I finished playing. It's not always a comfortable experience, but it's certainly a memorable one. GTA 4 doesn't shy away from humor. Its story is fundamentally a dark one. It's a tale of an immigrant's disillusionment, a critique of the American dream, and an exploration of the moral gray areas. But hey, that's just my take on it. What did you think about GTA 4's darker tone? Did it work for you, or did you miss the more lighthearted approach of other GTA games? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe to the channel if you love GTA. See ya.